All right, everyone, welcome. Getting there. Will we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. This is our first Budget and Finance Committee meeting this evening to discuss the general fund budget for 2018-2019 fiscal year. Before we move into that phase of our presentation this evening, we would like to review our proposed 2018-2019 Capital Reserve Fund budget. And with that, I'd like to give the microphone to Mr. Bob Brown, our Facilities Director. Bob will be able to go through the budget and provide an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Schott. It's actually short this year. Starting at the top, we have some entrance enhancements. These are estimates that we're going to be looking to get some hard estimates to see if we're going to do it. Reworking the front end of Ramsey Elementary, and in addition to a rear entrance at the high school. And we lost it, Mike, though. As we're moving down, these next three items, they are door replacements: Gateway High School, Sports Complex, and University Park. Hardware upgrades include, in some instances, new doors, new locking mechanisms, swipe card access to a number of them. We've been systematically switching doors starting 2 years ago with the worst, and each year we work down that list to get them up to working order. We have a lot of doors in the district. They've been in place for many, many years. So what you see here is what we propose to do this upcoming year. Moving down, we have some stage lighting that is necessary on the stage. As a lot of you know, we've been replacing a lot of lighting throughout the district with LEDs. That's what these are as well. What they have in place now uses a lot of electricity. They're very expensive to replace bulbs, and this will actually pay for itself. It'll be a number of years, but we won't be wearing out the stuff that cost us money on an annual basis. As we go down, we have Atrium ceiling fans, and what those would be is, if you've been in the sports complex, that ceiling is 30 plus feet high. All the heat goes to the ceiling. So if you're there in the winter, as a number of people are, the cold air is at the bottom. This as well will reduce our energy consumption by pushing the heat down to where it's actually felt. Again, that's something that will pay for itself in time, but it'll also make the area comfortable. As we move down, we have the big items here: the Gateway Stadium bleacher retaining wall repair. It is in disrepair, as if you've heard the last few meetings. We're getting that going out to bid to get solid numbers. Those numbers are based on the estimates from our engineers. The next item is the new scoreboard for the stadium as well. If you visit it, it goes out all the time. It is in dire need of replacement. That also is an estimate that is not a confirmed number, but fairly close based on the vendors that we've spoken to. Line number 23, after we replaced our lighting in all the parking lots throughout the district, we drove around, myself and Mr. Lapsovich, and we located all what we call the dark spots, the unsafe areas that are out there. You won't notice it unless you're traveling around in those areas at night, but we pinpointed approximately 20 locations that need to be lit up. for safety reasons. So that's what that number is. And as we get down here, another item that we've been speaking about quite often lately is the marquee, which would be located at the corner of Route 48 and Gateway Campus Boulevard. We're working on some designs of that right at the moment to be able to get some solid numbers put together. Our existing marquee, as well, is extremely old. Parts are not available. It's under constant repair. And the last item is a Dectron dehumidification system for the swimming pool area. What that does is it controls the humidity and the temperature within the pool area itself. That is around 20 years old now. We have it up and limping and working. We're collecting prices as we go now. This number was a suggested number by vendors, so it was a number to put into the budget now. And as we get solid numbers, then we would put it out for bid. Any questions on any of that stuff?
I think for the public, if I could just interject before the questions here, a number of those items that you see with the scoreboard and the marquee, the district has been in communication with sponsors, possible sponsors for those. So when you see that price, we feel as if it could be offset with a number of different potential sponsors. I wonder if we can add a wall. If someone's willing to put their name on that wall, I got no problem.
I mean, I know it's one side of the stadium, so it's face the wall, but there's got to be something we can do on off the wall.
A lot of it's space.
It is. It's a giant billboard. I think it's possible to find someone.
You can throw it out there, absolutely. And that stadium wall repair, just so the public understands, the main part of the wall, which extends out from the tunnel area, has separated to the point where we have structural engineers come in and look at it. The entire need of replacement. Every freeze thaw expands it a little further. The railings are weak at this point, so it is definitely a safety issue.
There's a little water that always sort of seeps through the soil, so it's always wet. We don't need mosquitoes down there.
And that wall is the original 1957-58 stadium wall. So definitely got our use out. Questions?
Yes. Yes, I do. They are in the second line. Door number 2, door number 3 are the exterior doors that go into the swimming area. We haven't looked at replacing it yet. I actually just had guys up there to make sure what was lit and was not, because you guys hopefully will be playing next week. I mean, that's our hopes anyhow. So, but not this year, obviously, but that is not out of our radar, as well as the baseball. Because they've both been there quite a while. They are old technology. They're old screw-in light bulbs. So we are looking at that. It just wasn't as dire as the other ones right at the moment.
If it was a dire situation coming to the end of the past budget, we got to start looking at is that something we could potentially keep going? Or, just to kick it down for one more year, what would the cost difference be? Just to do a ballpark.
Well, right at the moment, we have it up and running. The best it is run in probably 10 or 12 years. We actually had some good technicians that were able to fix things that were unable to be repaired in the past. So right now, like I said, it is running the best that it has been. If push came to shove, I'd say we would definitely have to look at that, and that would be a board decision. I would think any price that we get now, next year, you could probably add 10% or so. Sure. Yeah, what I've been following up on, instead of just a carte blanche replacement of this unit, which would entail tearing out either the roof or the side of the wall because of the sheer size of the unit, and that obviously would be a big cost right there without anything to do with the unit. I've been talking to different companies as far as keeping the unit, either rebuilding, retrofitting equipment in that old case is one option. Another option was to tear it apart there, bring it in pieces, and reassemble new, keeping all the existing ductwork in the pool area itself, so just the unit, not affecting the swimming space at all. And another option was to redo a unit on the exterior building of the roof, which it sits adjacent to now. So we're looking at is all the options we can to keep that price as reasonable as possible. That reflects, yes, tearing out the wall. That was, yes, and we are trying to highest worst case scenario, and I don't believe we're going to go anywhere near that. And that was Vectron themselves that came back to me, and I think they feel like they have you over a barrel. So I would rather have worst case scenario in there and come way under that, and that's our goal.
Manufacturing parts to keep it up and running to really avoid.
So we'll get that number and bring it to you, and then you have a better idea of if we're able to do it. I would not like to push it down the road, knowing that when it fails, there's nothing much we can do. It's not like we can plug in some heaters and keep the place warm or open the door in the middle of winter to get rid of humidity. It affects our building drastically.
I didn't mean that's hitting the topic long.
No.
At least the discussion to have it on record.
You're right. That's what you got to talk about. That's right. What it's up there for.
And also the public needs to know that we invested this past summer.
Actually, it was good. It was under 20 grand total, and we're actually trying to recoup some of that right now, which looks like we're able to get a piece of it back. Those are some other, we're going to just handle those through our regular maintenance and repair, because we were able to refurbish all of the stainless steel equipment, which is the diving stands, the lifeguard stands, the ladders, to take them off once summer is here, send them out, clean them up, powder coat them, reinstall them. All right. Well, I'll hand it back to Mr. Yes. Those are the doors at the top of the second stairs when you come in the main entrance. Yes, those stairs, they will have a swipe access, so the teachers will be able to get in and out. Right now, they tend to block them open, which in the worst case scenario could be a safety hazard. They're original, and they just don't shut anymore. So that's what that is. I have the locks. Your badge, this badge will operate that door. So if the doors have to be replaced, I have to wait for this budget in order to get the doors. I do have the locks already. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Schott. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, and just to mention that this meeting will be broadcasted on local cable access and on the Gateway website. The PowerPoints will be posted tomorrow. They'll be available under the business office, under the tab for budgets, and for the current fiscal year. All right. Now, Dr. Short said I have 5 hours this evening to, so I'll take all 5 if that's okay. Not kidding. As everyone knows, I could talk for 5 hours if I had to. But I won't.
When Paul said 42 slides, I was like, what?
46.
46, thank you.
All right, with that, we'll jump. No, actually not. A few different things. All right, we'll jump in. Again, I do want to stress this is a preliminary budget. Even the numbers we're looking at this evening are going to change. They're always changing. Always changing. They'll change up to the point of final approval in June. I mean, honestly, that's how it is. Depending on any current information that comes in, we do that. So stay tuned for updated numbers. But again, just to jump in terms of currently, what we're going to look at this evening is a balanced budget. Do want to note that it is balanced with the inclusion. Inclusion of a recommended real estate tax increase, which we'll get into more detail later specifically. But again, that is included in the $74,871,000. Overall decrease of $878,000, or approximately 1.16% under the current 17-18 budgeted total revenues in the revenue side. Likewise, on the expenditure side, again, as I said, currently is shown as balanced. So again, the same number as revenue, $74,871,000, decrease of $878,000, 1.16. Take those two numbers together on the next page. Again, decrease in revenues, decrease in expenditures, nets out to zero deficit currently. But again, due to the utilization of a recommended tax increase amount. All right, state budget. It's been a little quiet. All the budget hearings for the House and Senate, those have occurred and have concluded. Those were primarily occurred in February. That ended towards the beginning of March. State House returned on March 12th. State Senate just returned this week. Now they're getting into the state budget negotiations. Interesting twist on everything this year is it's an election year. So will we see an on-time state budget? Stay tuned. I mean, honestly, we don't know. We really don't know what to expect, whether it will be something closer to being on time, not on time in the fact that we're on time with our budget by June 30th, but it may be a couple weeks off. That's still better than what we've seen over the last several fiscal years, being months after the fact. Again, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with that. But since Governor Wolf unveiled his budget, it's been very quiet. I haven't heard a whole lot of activity coming out of Harrisburg on that front. So again, we'll just have to wait and see. But if we take a look at some of the information we have heard, again, from Governor Wolf's budget. Again, looking at some of the big areas for us, basic education funding, regular and block grant, special education funding. Currently, the governor is proposing a $100 million increase in basic education funding, regular and block grant, and that name's morphed over the years, different names. I want to say this is probably, what, the 8th, 9th year it's been level funded. Special education funding, only $20 million increase, which is not very much when you spread it across the entire Commonwealth. Again, one of the big things with some of the numbers we're going to see on the next slide is to keep in mind is that PD still has to update their formulas for basic education funding and special education funding with some of the final 16-17 fiscal year data from school districts. Again, it's heavily dependent upon the previous full fiscal year financial reporting. I have not heard that occurring as of yet. I anticipate once that happens, my state association, Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, will alert us to the fact that there's been new sheets posted, and we'll go out, we'll get those numbers, we'll update the budget accordingly, up or down from wherever that may happen to be. Now, in terms of what those amounts are, again, we've handled this different ways over the years. The last couple, we've taken the number and budgeted. Fortunately, there have been times where we've received a little bit extra on top of that when it was all said and done. So again, time will tell. But unfortunately, when you look at our current portion of basic education funding, it's only an increase of $136,493. Likewise, special education funding, increase of only $28,510. Taking those two numbers together, we're only talking $165,000 of increases from the state. And again, these are just some of the major line items. This isn't the increases from the state for 50% of the PSERs, some of those other items. These are just some of the bigger line items, which we'll also take a look at here shortly in terms of how these stack up in terms of our larger revenue streams for the district. But again, no matter what number we put in, if there's a prolonged state budget impasse and the amounts would either be level funded, decrease, ultimately that would come from fund balance. So again, that's one of the reasons why we have fund balance. Again, we'll get into fund balance a little more later as well. In terms of PA pension reform, no direct relief in terms of the employer contribution rates. There's going to be some things that they're going to start for new employees in about another year from now. We're not going to get into those this evening. But in terms of our direct costs, no expected reduction. One of the nice things I can actually say, this is probably one of the few fiscal years I've been able to say this for a while, is that when you look at the projected rate at 33.43 compared to the current rate, this is actually one of the smallest incremental increases we've seen in a long time. A long time. And again, as I stated before, and we'll see some numbers here in the next slide or two, the state actually reimburses the district and all school districts in the Commonwealth 50% of the employer portion. So again, this amount we would be paying, we would be netting out to half of that amount. Now, this slide represents some of the increases we've seen, actual numbers, going back to 13-14, 16.93. And as you can see, every year we've been increasing. Current year, 17-18, again, 32.57. 18-19, 33.43. 34.79. 35.26. Those are the latest projections as far out as PSERS has calculated. A lot of this is dependent upon the returns in the stock market on the investments. So again, these do change. But again, compared to where we've climbed and starting, we're talking estimates that are still fairly close compared to what we've had. But again, we'll find out for sure. Again, these are estimated. These are not actual by any means. Now, in terms of what does that mean for actual dollars spent by the district? Now, this slide goes back a little further than the previous slide, but again, these are actual numbers since 05-06 school year, all the way up to what we have projected for the current 17-18, over $10 million, and also in 18-19, $10.5 million. And again, even as I stated before, this number will be changing. Just to give you another visual depiction of that increase in actual dollars. Significant. All right, as I mentioned before, some of our revenue categories, again, we know we have local, state, federal, 71% for local, state 26%, federal 3%. As we saw with our previous slides, flat or very little projected growth moving forward for not only 18-19, but probably subsequent years to that as well. Again, time will tell exactly what we end up with, but the number we saw previously, $136,000 for some state revenue, that's not a lot by any means. So this is just a visual depiction of the previous slide, again, just showing that local revenues, 71%, all the way down to our smallest portion. So what is our local revenues? These are some of our major items, and obviously current real estate tax is our largest, and quite honestly, one of the really few line items we really still have control over. All by various other taxes: current income tax, mercantile, delinquent real estate, deed transfer, delinquent earned income tax, local service tax, and interest revenue, which is starting to make a little bit of a comeback. Federal Reserve did raise the rate yesterday, so that helps us on the savings side of things. It doesn't help the rest of the economy in terms of borrowing and other things along those lines, but at least we're starting to see a little bit of movement in terms of interest revenue. It's been almost non-existent for years, so that's starting to have some upticks to it. So that we've been able to bump up our revenue line item in the budget as well, which is nice to finally see that a little bit. Moving on, our state revenue. Again, our basic education subsidies are largest, followed by retirement. Again, we receive, that represents 50% of our expenditures. Special ed, property tax reduction allocation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Likewise, Social Security FICA reimbursement. We also receive 50% of that cost from the state, followed by transportation, regular and block grant, and our debt service reimbursement subsidy, which we'll also talk about later as well. Federal revenue. Again, only at 3% of the budget. Title I funds are largest. Primarily, all these are passed through the Pennsylvania Department of Education, with the exception of the IDEA funds. Those are passed through the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Number 3. Access, Title II, Title III, Title IV actually was a new component we received during the current 17-18 fiscal year, and we are also expected to receive some of those funds for 18-19 fiscal year. Again, our top 10 revenues, kind of putting all of those three categories together, how they shake up. Again, current year real estate taxes north of $44 million. Basic education subsidy, almost $8 million. Retirement reimbursement, again, that's our 50%. Current earned income taxes, $3.8 million. Special education subsidy, mercantile taxes, state property tax reduction, which we'll get into a little more later. Again, this is strictly a pass-through number. It's revenue neutral when we do receive it. And in this projection, we have some unassigned fund balance utilization as well. And followed by Social Security FICA, 50%, $1.2 million, and some of our transportation reimbursement subsidy. Again, just a visual depiction of those previous numbers. Again, real estate taxes jumps out in terms of our overall revenues, 59%, large component. And then just other accounts for about 6%, other various miscellaneous smaller items included in the revenue budget. Top 10 expenditures. Again, employee wages, salaries, $32 million. Retirement expenditures, again, that's the same gross number we saw on the previous slide. Almost $10.6 million, again, gross, prior to the 50% reimbursement. Health insurance expenditures, transportation, charter cyber school expenditures, special ed. This is special ed with everything else, with the exception of any special education salaries. They were not included in that line item. Bond and debt service expenditures of $2.6 million. We'll be talking about this in a little more detail later this evening as well. Social Security FICA, in the gross amount, almost $2.5 million. Technology expenditures, capital reserve fund transfers. Again, this is the number we saw this evening. Actually, this number still needs to be updated because we just updated the other amount for some additional line items. So then this will be updated next time you see this slide as well. Again, just another visual depiction of our various expenditures. Again, employee wages, salaries, 43% is the largest component of our budget. And then followed by some of our benefits and the whole way around other expenditures, just to point out on this slide, approximately 9%. If not other areas. Would you like to ask? Yeah, if you took approximately, it was 2.6 million divided by 70, yeah, I'd say 75 million. That's probably pretty close. Yeah. That total debt service, correct. That's total gross debt service. We actually, what we'll see a little bit later, we actually get a piece of that back from Pennsylvania Department of Education for our bonds. And that varies every year as well. All right, and just present some of the information a little bit differently. Again, as we saw previously, 43%, approximately wages and salaries of the total budget. Benefits, 26%. So as this budget we've seen this evening, about 69% of the total 18-19 budget goes towards wages, salaries, and benefits. And this slide, just some information. Again, as I stated before, we'll continue to make adjustments as new information becomes available, as we continue to review all of the expenditures, revenues, any new information becomes available. We obviously update everything that we can for that. So again, we're doing that on the expenditure side, and as I stated before, also on the revenue side. So again, constantly looking to see what we can add. But again, as we've seen before, a lot of our items on the revenue side are either flat or very small growth, but we know our expenditures are going up incrementally. So again, it's always difficult trying to make the two balance and meet in the middle. All right, now we get into some millage. Again, this is a slide I've used now for a little while. It's actually I think it's a good slide. It just defines what is millage, exactly what's the definition of it. And each mill represents $1 of tax assessment for $1,000 of assessed property value. All right, currently, 1718, 19.3264 mills. We are currently 13th lowest millage rate out of 42 school districts in Allegheny County. 13th lowest. I'm going to say who's the lowest. Chartiers Valley School District is now the lowest in Allegheny County at 16.6067 mills. Likewise, the highest, Wilkinsburg Area School District at 32.63 mills. Again, this is as they sit current 17-18 fiscal year. No, they don't. So just a little bit of change from what we've seen over the last couple of years. All right. And some of our neighboring school districts. And again, we have up here, again, these are our neighbors geographically located around us. Borough 20.243, Woodland Hills 25.35, East Allegheny 26.9722, and Hills 27.557. Again, I would anticipate, yes, I would anticipate, I mean, even though we have ours going up, I would definitely anticipate these going up as well. I would be shocked if those districts do not raise their millage. But we'll find out probably July and August whenever the AIU does their survey. As they do every year, they collect this information, release it out to the district, and again, I will provide that to the board as well once I have it. It was a long time, yeah. There's a few other stories I can tell you about. Yeah, I won't say anything. All right, and so what I also did, in addition to showing where we are, again, just a visual depiction. We have some other districts on here. Again, we have the two that I previously mentioned, the lowest, the highest, and then I threw a couple other districts on just to give a kind of a flavor for some of the other districts. Again, we have North Allegheny, Keystone Oaks, Fox Chapel, Pine Richland. So there's just a couple other school districts just to, again, show where we kind of fall in with some other folks. All right, in terms of assessed value, it's been a few years now since we were reassessed. I have a couple other slides to show you, but currently, in terms of, so what issues are we seeing currently, 17, 18, 18, 19? Assessment appeals. Some assessment appeals the district is taking, some we are defending. And this has been going on for a long time. It's a constant process. And sometimes there's some we lose, there's some we win. I mean, quite honestly, Allegheny County posts the values. They've been getting a little bit better about it. I want to say about every other week now they're getting back to doing that. There was a span of several months where they have not updated their website. But again, it's literally like when I pull the values out, it's like the stock market. Again, they're up and down. They're up and down for that. But I prefer to use the values that they post because it's more accurate, because currently and during the month of January, Allegheny County sends out their assessed values for calendar year to all entities. And then we get another CD in May, which is the homestead properties, which will be something else we'll talk about here this evening as well. So those are the two official snapshots. But in terms of the constant updates, I do appreciate when they do put that information up so I can constantly calculate it just to see where do we stand or if there's any other anticipated problems. But unfortunately, with the way the assessments work, we never really know exactly if an appeal is initiated. It may not be cleared off the book, so to speak, for 5 or 6 years. That creates problems of its own as well in terms of you're not only talking about current year refunds, unanticipated, but you're also talking prior year refunds. So again, when you can't really put your finger on the prior year refund number, and sometimes not even on the current year refunds, again, you have fund balance. Ultimately, that's our safety net for a lot of these things. And as we'll see also here subsequently, fortunately, we do have fund balance. A lot of our neighbors do not have fund balance to rely on. But again, the appeals process, it's frustrating. I have to admit, it's frustrating to me because it's not cut and dry. You just never know when the notices come through. Bonnie gets notices every couple of days from the county that we take a look at to see what properties, and the ones that I really hate to say are the ones that, when you open up the attachments and there's 10 or 12 of them, and they go back to like 2012. Because when I go through every one of them, when I see Gateway on there, if it's a decrease, that's a refund that's coming out. So within probably 30 days, Mr. Fulkerson typically will be faxing over a list of refunds. That's typically how that process works. Now, on the flip side too, if we're able to get some of the properties that, as I said before, do increase, those are supplemental billings that go out. So, in theory, we could also have a building that maybe increase, say, for instance, $10 million. Likewise, we could have supplemental billings going back to 2012 as well. So at the end of the day, you hope you have more coming in than going out. We're not talking about a fund balance issue with that. But again, you just never know. Never know. Now, just to give you an idea in terms of this whole
assessment roller coaster. Back when we had to reassess and utilize the values, we were at the time we were forced to utilize starting for the 13-14 school year. And at that time, our assessed value was about $2.5 billion. Yes, billion. So what we did at the time, made some adjustments, and again, based off of information that we had in terms of appeals, did a calculation. We actually built in a $36 million decrease because we didn't have any other really good information, historical information to really look at. Subsequent to that, when we were planning our 14-15 budget, we built in another $5 million decrease into the calculation. Unfortunately, the total decrease, again, from June of 13 to March of 18 was almost $98 million. Again, as I indicated with these two numbers, we anticipated about 41 million of it, but there was still approximately $57 million of decreased assessed value. That's a significant amount to make up. Ideally, what I like to have seen occur was to, if this process would have waited another year, like I was hoping for. I mean, when you look at the difference between here and here, that's pretty significant. We could have started maybe around here, had cleaner numbers. So now we're only talking a decrease from here to here. That's not too bad. About $16 million as opposed to almost $57 million. But again, the process didn't work out that way. This is just another visual depiction of some of those same numbers. Again, just showing where the number started and where we're currently at. And as you can see, in the last couple major points that were utilized in the setting of the millage rates, kind of stabilized. Nothing too radical in terms of where these points are located here. But again, just another way just to depict some of that same information for everyone. All right. Now, currently, our index is 2.8%. So the equivalent of 2.8%, then we take 2.8% times our current millage rate. Our maximum mills that can be raised for 18-19 is 0.5411 mills. So as was indicated previously, was recommended in what is currently in the budget, would take the 19.3264 mills plus the 0.5411 mills would be 19.8675 mills. Now I just advanced where this would be on the total chart of 42. And again, this does not take into account any other school districts raising their millage rates, assuming everything else would stay the same, which is highly doubtful. We would move from 13th to the 15th lowest for 18-19. Again, that's true because they're higher millage rates, and some of them are also could be at 2.8%. Some could be less. Some may decide to, and some actually may force to not only take the index but also apply for referendum exceptions. It's very possible they could decide to go higher than the index. And quite honestly, I think some of our neighbors need to go higher than the index to even have a shot of even trying to get to where they need to get. But again, we'll find out for sure when all the dust settles on the entire fiscal year for all school districts in Allegheny County. So again, this is just looking at it again, current millage rate, maximum millage rate, maximum increase. And then so we've seen 2.8%, 0.5411 mils. So what does that equate to in terms of dollars? That's approximately net $1,245,000 of income. That's how much that would bring in. Yeah, I have some values here. We'll take a look at as well. They'll depict that. And in fact, I'm trying to think. I think it's in some subsequent slides. Now, this is some historical information. This is going back to 0203. And just to point a few things out again, fiscal year column, millage rates, whether we had a tax increase or not, what the number of mills were, whether we used fund balance and how much fund balance was utilized. And looking at some of these, there were some years we didn't use anything. We didn't, and when I say anything, we didn't use any tax increase, we didn't use any fund balance. There were other years where we didn't raise the mills, but we used fund balance. Likewise, there were other years where we've had combinations of tax increase and fund balance. We've seen a little bit of everything over the years. But one of the things to point out as well is that when you look at the longest span of time when we did not raise taxes at all, after these 4 years, look what we ended up at the time we raised was 1.61 mils. Now, that was a combination of not only index, but I believe almost 3 full referendum exceptions at the time as well. So again, that was the only time in the history of Act 1 that we've gone above the index and utilized any of those referendum exceptions. But again, pointing out that that was required and necessary because, again, we had not raised taxes. When you look subsequent to this amount, and you look at some of the increases, much lower, much lower. So again, I think a nice schedule is really depicts some of that history. Now, one thing just to point out here, when you look at this and you're like, well, wait a minute, why did we go from 21.85 to 18.8919? That was a year reassessment. So anyone who recalls at the time when we were in this room reviewing this, what we had to first do was calculate a revenue neutral new millage rate. And then at the time, our index was 2%, which equated to approximately 0.3704. So we actually were able to do that. But that's why that actually decreased, was as a direct result of the reassessment of Allegheny County and our assigned value, similar to what we saw on the previous slides. All right. Now, in terms of what does the 2.8% mean for a property in Monroeville Pitcairn? And again, these are county-provided numbers. The median taxable assessed value of a property in Monroeville, $108,200. 2.8% equates to approximately $58.55 per year, or about $4.88 per month. Likewise, in the borough of Pitcairn, median taxable value is $34,800. That equates to $18.83 per year, or $1.57 per month. And again, you know, if this was $100,000 for either one, it'd be $54.11. That would be the increase. All right, now as I mentioned previously about the Homestead Exclusion, we've anticipated receiving approximately the same amount of money. We actually initially utilized the same amount for this is a 17-18 amount, just south of $1.5 million. The state will determine on April 15th whether gaming revenues will be available for distribution. Once they do that, we will actually get the distribution amount on May 1st, and then we will be able to do our calculations. I will also, as I previously stated, I'll get the CD from the county, which will provide me with the official list of homestead properties located in the municipality of Monroeville, borough of Pitcairn. That list does also go up and down. If a property transfers from one individual to another and it's a qualifying homestead, the homestead exclusion does not automatically transfer to the new owner. The new owner must apply for that exclusion. That's part of the reason why when we look at the numbers every year, the number goes up and down. Now, the other thing is when you have a fixed pot of money and the number goes up, you share in less portion of that. So one of the things that we'll get questions on in some of those years where we didn't raise taxes, but the number of homesteads went up and we were able to provide this, somebody would look at their net bill and say, well, wait a minute, this went up. Well, yes, it did go up because your exclusion, your portion of the exclusion went down. So it's going to go up. But again, until we get that official list, I get to do a fund calculation with all of that as well. In June is when we present that information for approval. That's also goes on our real estate tax bills. We'll find out for sure. But again, our anticipation is to receive approximately the same amount. Again, revenue neutral. We receive the amount, we pass the amount through. We don't gain anything from it. Now, this is just a visual depiction. Going back to 0809, 1,458,000. As you can see, the current year, 1,460,000. Not a lot of increase every year for that. You know, this was touted to replace property taxes. It just never happened. You know, we're even hearing things right now in the governor's race about looking to eliminate property taxes. We'll see. We'll see. It's a big item. One of the hurdles was cleared though back in the primary. Everyone recalls that ballot question that was on there to increase it. So that's one of the hurdles. But again, at the end of the day, the biggest hurdle to replace not only this, but even more of our, let's use our $44 million we have out there, is that you have to come up with a tax shift. The state needs to come up with a tax shift. That could be in the form of them increasing the personal income tax and or the sales tax. So whether we actually see that or not, time will tell. But even if something like that would come through, it would probably take, and this was even something that came up at my state conference. I had an opportunity to talk to one of the individuals from the state. It could take easily anywhere from 12 to 18 months for the state just to accumulate enough money to start to issue the funds. So for instance, this isn't something that would happen overnight. Even if they were on the verge of putting this into place right now to begin July 1st, there's no money available to start paying us, which would be catastrophic. There's no doubt it's catastrophic. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this, even with some of the legislation that was previously released. Ultimately, we'll keep an eye on it like we do everything else, and we'll see what we need to do with it. All right. So, just to kind of tie some of the ends up with this. These are current. This is the current 17-18 number. It was $179.15. That's what everyone actually ended up seeing that at Homestead Exclusion. Just to net what that would be to proposed recommended millage increase. That's simply all we're doing with this is taking the numbers in the previous slide and then those two together just to show some offset to them. And again, as we're all seeing, our dollars are stretched to the max. Now, actually, I have to admit, I found this and I liked it, so I stole it from another, I forget what the email was, but just wanted to throw that in there, something a little different. All right, now as I previously stated, fund balance. Luckily, we have it. And again, this was taken from, this is the same monthly report that starts off section B2 every month in the board report. Just taking our beginning fund balance, putting the items in there, the bigger items in there we know we have coming down through, whether they were decreases to, anticipated decreases, anticipated increases, net projected decrease as of when this slide was put together, almost $4 million. Tax projected ending balance as of this particular point in time, about $10.6 million. Again, as I always say, very possible this number will actually be greater or less. We won't know for several months after the fiscal year until we make all of our various revenue accruals, expenditure accruals, reconcile everything out to the dollar and see exactly what the net number is and ultimately what the impact is on fund balance. Now, again, just taking that number and again looking at our three components of fund balance. We have our unassigned, non-spendable, committed, and total fund balance. On a subsequent slide, I have some other a slide that actually addresses each of these three. But again, just taking this number divided by our current expenditures that's contained in this PowerPoint, it's approximately 14.15% fund balance, total fund balance. Again, total fund balance is recommended to be between 5 and 15%. So again, it's nice to have a number to utilize for our various capital projects, to have as a cushion, and to be able to utilize it for one-time expenditures and or expenditures, as we've seen this evening, that may not occur again for another 60 years. Those are the appropriate utilization of fund balance. And again, we've used this slide before. It's just definitions of each of those three. Again, unassigned is immediately available to be utilized. Non-spendable is a restricted portion. It's an offset of prepaid expenditures. And committed fund balance is not immediately available. It's designated by the board. It can be designated back as well, but by official board action. And in terms of the composition of the committed fund balance, again, this is a slide we've utilized before. This is the same number, just showing what the breakdown of that is and when it was designated by the board. And again, as this particular presentation we've seen this evening, this is what was anticipated to be the net effect on the fund balance. Actually, I anticipate making changes that will most likely increase this number and decrease this number. So stay tuned. All right. Now, a couple items that initially were included in 1819, which we've already not included in 1819. In fact, we would like to purchase in the current 17-18 fiscal year is a new truck for the maintenance department. I believe the truck we'd like to replace is the old 2001 mail truck, which is in very, very poor condition, to say the least. But again, Mr. Brown has anticipated about $40,000 with the various required accessories for the maintenance department to utilize. Also, what we would like to purchase, we do have a very big need for an additional van. We do have one van, a special ed van with a lift, but however, we do have a need for just a regular van without a lift to be utilized for various district groups. Particularly this time of year, we have a lot of folks in small numbers traveling to state, national competitions. I did get an initial quote for a van of approximately $27,000. When you look at, honestly, what the rental costs would be on vans over 4 or 5 years, it really pays for itself. There's no doubt about it. And traditionally, with the way we hold vehicles, we easily get 10 years out of our vehicles as well. So I honestly consider this to be an investment to be able to be utilized by the various groups of the district moving forward. So now, also, as I mentioned previously, debt service. Now, we kind of have a little bit of an interesting situation that back in 2016, the district actually refinanced some bonds. We actually refinanced the 2007 series of bonds, and we issued 2016 series of bonds. What we actually did, which was different than the two previous refundings of bonds, is that instead of taking cash up front in term of funds that have to be utilized for capital projects, we actually elected to utilize debt reduction. So what transpired from that transaction is that we were actually able to take debt reduction in the form of reduced principal and interest payments for a portion of the 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19 debt service payments. 18-19 being the largest reduction compared to the two previous fiscal years. So yes, it should be pretty close. Just to give you an idea, for 18-19, looking at total principal and interest of about $2.6 million. Now, these are various principal and interest payments on the Series 2012 bonds. and the Series 2016 bonds. PD actually provides a subsidy back calculated. So these two bonds represent two large previous capital projects. So each of those capital projects were assigned a percentage reimbursement. One was approximately 50.2%. The other project was a little over, I want to say 5.1%. Now again, those are small percentages, but unfortunately with the way PD reimburses us, that number is also, so basically you would take each of these gross payments for each series times either 50% or 5.1%, and then unfortunately reduce it further by the market value aid ratio of the district, which is normally around 0.37%. So when it comes down to it, $194,000 out of about $2.6 million isn't a whole lot of a reimbursement. It's just not. It's nowhere near, say, like our reimbursement of our retirement. I mean, I'd love to see this at 50% and actually get 50%, but that's just not how the formula is set up. So for 18-19, we're projecting approximate, because again, I don't know what the calculated market value aid ratio is going to be. I used the current one for the current 17-18 fiscal year. It's usually pretty close when I've been able to do that. Almost $2.4 million in net debt service for 18-19. So, why are we talking about this? For 19-20, we go back to the full debt service amount for each of those issues. And the way our debt is and has been, it's always been approximately around $4 million. That's how any subsequent issues have been wrapped around current issues. So what that does, that keeps a consistent number from fiscal year to fiscal year. So we're not seeing large spikes. So we're not seeing, for instance, 2 million one year, maybe going to 6 million, or maybe up to 8 million, and then maybe down to 6 million again. We don't see that. We have a consistent number for budgeting purposes. That's very important. So likewise, this number is going up. Our subsidy number is going up. But again, even using the same criteria we used here, it's not even $500,000. So we're netting out about $3.5 million. So again, when you take the difference, 3.5 to 2.4, so there's another almost $1.2 million of expenditure for 19-20. That's looming on the horizon. And again, we always try to focus on numbers we know. These are calculated numbers. They are on debt service schedules. This is going to happen. There's nothing that's going to stop this from happening. Again, that's why we're making everyone aware of it. We're almost done. No, that's not. No. Well, and I won't get into the whole thing, but we're still actually waiting to find out what PD is going to do for any new projects. I mean, let's face it. I mean, as we've seen this evening, we have buildings that are in need of capital projects. We have other things that we're in the midst of taking a look at as well. There's a lot of districts across the entire Commonwealth that have buildings that either need renovated or replaced in some manner. They're currently looking at, it's called the PlanCon system, to figure out what are they going to do. Now, districts like us, we have 2 projects that have been committed by PD that they have to fund. Now, how PD is taking care of that, they've taken out, I can't remember the exact amount, how many billions of dollars in bonds to make good on their commitment to all the school districts. The problem is that there's a group of districts who've been submitting during this so-called PlanCon moratorium. They have no idea if they're going to get any money at all for their projects. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen with that. My conference a couple weeks ago, there was one session I attended on that, nothing earth-shatteringly new. The commission still has to work out some things and make their official report. So again, something else, unfortunately, we have to keep an eye on for that. No. I wouldn't think for what we've been talking about, I wouldn't anticipate anything. I honestly don't. No, honestly, the old system that we saw was that it was based on a 20-year clock. That's what it's called. Typically, in theory, you start with one project, whether it's a new building, some type of a multi-building renovation, as we've done multi-building renovations. Ideally, you're issuing 20 years of bonds. So in theory, in 20 years, your project's done, your bonds are paid for, you're ready to do another project. Now, most bonds are 30-year bonds. So there's a problem already out of the gate with that. The other problem is, and quite honestly, and I've said this before, but it was something we did, which under the old system, we probably shouldn't have done. When we did our original 97 project, our 97 bonds, those were the bonds, $35 million issue. We touched every building in the district, whether it was new windows, new wings, whatever the case may be for that. We touched a lot of different buildings for that. At the time, it was slightly more than 51% reimbursement. That's pretty high in terms of ClaimCon world. Now, fast forward to 2003, when we did the high school renovation, we issued $30.5 million in bonds. Well, someone decided that they wanted to, instead of letting the 20-year clock reset and maximize the project, they elected to do a ClaimCon project, and the gross reimbursement was only 5.1%. It's not a lot to reset the clock. Now, fortunately, maybe unfortunately, it seems like that piece of it's probably going to go away. We just don't know what we're going to ultimately end up with in terms of new projects moving forward for that. But assuming that the system would have stayed that way, you know, our next opportunity would be 2023 for the next 20-year window to go through. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Again, this is just a summary of the budget process currently up to this point in time. Again, like to see the index resolution was previously adopted by the board back in January. Again, referendum exceptions have not been requested and will not be utilized by the district in any manner to further increase the millage rate above the 2.8% maximum amount, which again, 0.5411 mils. The proposed final 18-19 general fund budget will be adopted by the board on May 24th. Again, that's just another Act 1 hoop for the district to jump through. The formal PD 2028 budget document will be developed and it will be posted on the district's website at that time. And also we anticipate and hope that we'll be able to also post some of the corresponding detailed Excel spreadsheets as well, which provides a little greater information than the summary information contained on the required budget document. So again, we're basically following the pre-Act 1 budget timeline. Again, we're looking for final adoption by the board on June 28th of the 2018-19 fiscal year budget. And again, this is the final slide. Again, these are just some future budget finance committee meetings. Again, the next one tentatively scheduled April 10th, followed by May 8th, and then June 5th, which serves as the final public hearing. Again, all the budget finance committee meetings will begin at 6 p.m. right here in the high school AGI. Any questions?
Can I use my teacher voice? We're being taped, okay. Hey, Paul, nice job with the presentation. I want to tell you that it was very thorough. I had a couple questions here. The delinquent real estate tax, how much is out? Do you know? I'm just curious. Okay. 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 The delinquent taxes, they're still posted on the website on your, so that's still out there. Okay. 13th lowest millage in the county. That's pretty phenomenal. You get a lot of bang for a buck here at Gateway. It's cheaper to live here in Monroeville, Pitcairn than it is in any of the surrounding areas. Even if you raise the millage, what you 0.5411 would put us at 15th, which is still in the lower third, I think.
That's without anyone else.
Without anyone else changing, yes. How many person van? I don't think you said. You just mentioned a van. 10 person van. Yes. Yes. How do you know that? Okay. All right. Perfect.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions from anyone? All right. Thank you. That concludes our meeting this evening. Like I said, we'll have more updates. We'll have more information. It's constantly changing. Thank you, everyone.